So we are in chapter 6, and as we saw, the ultimate goal of life through that's a um, recurring theme through all the chapters, the entire Gita, the ultimate goal being the search for oneself and the finding of oneself. There is no other goal greater than that, and all other goals are only worldly. But we don't see it because in the third chapter we were told, Dhumegna vriyate vannihi, like smoke covers the flames. And all that you have to do is blow away the smoke, and hey, the flames reveal themselves. So where were the flames? Did they appear from somewhere else? No, they were always present and they were only revealed. Knowledge is like that, self knowledge. It is not something far away in time or in space. It is right here, right now. But it is not within our experience, our daily experience of our sansari lives. That is what we have said. That is because of the clutter in the mind, and therefore silence in the mind is the only way in which we can reach that goal. If you notice, Karma Yoga is also actually telling you that you focus only and only on the work and keep your mind centered. It is another way of being in the world, being extremely active, but at the same time, the mind is as silent as and as steady as the river bed, even as the river on the surface rushes and gushes down the hill and through the valleys and dales. You will find that the rock bottom, the bed, the river bed is always steady. That happens or is expected to happen in Karma Yoga. So the result is the same, a steady mind. Without that, we cannot hope to reach that ultimate goal, and we cannot even afford to lose sight of it. If we don't even have it in our sight, we cannot reach it. So all that we strive for, we have to keep one and only one goal. That is our ultimate goal. Of course, along the way, because we are in the sansar and with families and jobs and obligations and duties and responsibilities, there will be a whole lot of smaller goals to achieve. This to be done and that to be done. All the smaller goals need not be turned into larger than they are. They have to be shown their place, that yes, you are part of the life, part of this sansar, and I will just do these duties and pass them by. The idea is to pass it by because we need our mind uncluttered to do dhyan. So what is chapter 6 all about? It's about dhyan. It's about one of the techniques apart from karma yoga to reach that state of silence, right? So taking a small recap, I'm in verse 5 of chapter 6. A very popular, very famous, and also I think well liked verse. Uddharedatmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhuhu atmaiva ripuratmanah. Lift yourself by yourself, or the mind can turn into your worst enemy, and it also has the capacity to be your best friend. How? Because when we act in the world without thinking, out of pure instinct and out of pure impulse, in that sense we are acting from prakriti meaning the swabhav and the sanskar which we have inherited in the vast ocean of several lives before. So that is our natural prakriti. We act from that, but that may not be the best, and therefore we have to move towards sattvic bhava. That means have our companionships and our recreation and food and work. Each one of these things have to touch the sattvic meaning that which is uncontaminated by agitation or corruption corruption of the mind. We have already seen is kama, krodha, mada, lobha, moh, and also the kind of recreation and companionship we seek or find ourselves in by default is what is going to lead us to a sattvic or a rajasic or a tamasic life. And therefore, whose choice is it? It is very much our choice to recognize, hey, this is my Prakriti. First recognize, first step, recognize and accept, this is my Prakriti, and I have to make certain lifestyle changes, and those lifestyle changes will lead me towards Sanskriti. The word sanskar or vasana from your previous lives is that word which comes from Sanskriti, which means refining your Prakriti, and then you reach the highest level. Your own mind can be your best friend if it reaches the Sanskriti or Sattvic level, but it can also be your worst enemy if you allow it to run amok in the world, just reacting and complaining and grumbling and letting go of the first emotion that strikes the mind. The mind is not a viveki. Viveki means it doesn't have the sense of discrimination and discernment. So it is not a good master to follow. You have to be master of the mind and let the mind follow you. But if we follow the mind itself is not in control, and it is a very poor master if you make it your master, and therefore it is something that can lead you to your downfall, or to our downfall, or to Arjun's downfall, where he has already found himself down in Vikriti. So Prakriti is where you are, recognize it. Know what changes in lifestyle we need to make to reach Sanskriti. Beware of the pitfalls to our downfall into Vikriti. That's all. And chapter 6 going ahead is going to, Krishna is going to enumerate all the benefits of a calm, quiet, cultivated mind, and all the pitfalls and obstacles that fall in its way. So these are going to be explained step by step going ahead. So not allowing ourselves to slip into Vikriti is like keeping your mind as your best friend. Otherwise we are going to just helplessly, willy-nilly just go in from experience to experience, from emotion to emotion, from situation to situation, from relationship to relationship, without any aim. And our aim is to refine the mind to reach Sanskriti. And in the 3rd chapter, Bhagavan has already said, Prakritim yanti bhutani nigrahe kim karishyati. Kim karishyati? Even I, Krishna, even God cannot help you once you sink very, very deep into your own Prakriti. Prakriti meaning those impulses which have become part of your encrusted, deepened vasana and sanskar of previous lives and many lives. Even God cannot change it, because then we have to experience the result or the karma phala of it ourselves. Bhutani means human beings. Even we have to do it. God will not interfere. It is not God's business anyway. So, moving to verse number 7, let's recap. Chapter 6. जीतात्मनः प्रशान्तस्य परमात्मा समाहितः शीतोष्णसुखखेषु तथा मानापमानयोः. Yogi Yunjita, look around, and all that we find is we are steeped in all kinds of vyakti, vastu, paristhiti, relationships and situations, and coming from engaging and involving ourselves in all these vyakti, vastu, paristhiti, relationships, etc., what we bring back into our minds is nothing but more hurts or aspirations or guilts or joys or sukha dukkha. Tell your mind these are of no relevance. Tell your mind all the vyakti, vastu, paristhiti, ghatna, situations, relationships, experiences that I see outside, no relevance. What they bring to me as a response, as in aspirations or sukha dukkha, no relevance. Just keep ticking it off in the mind. And then the mind is purged, and in that purged mind, just stay there. Come back and do all the duties with that purged mind. So this is a good piece of advice. Going ahead to verse number 10. Quick recap. Yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasi sthitah ekaki yata chittatma nirashira parigraha rahasi sthitah. Such a mind which is purged of all its wrong understanding of the world, that this world, this vastu, this paristhiti, this vyakti, this relationship, this ghatna, this situation, this experience is going to give me joy and more joy forever, is the wrong understanding of which the mind is now purged, hopefully. So when Arjun's mind is purged in such a way, this kind of mind begins to thirst for solitude, for silence. In fact, it becomes silence and it starts looking for being alone, solitude, ekaki, and rahasi sthita. Sthita actually means remaining. Remaining meaning remaining comfortable in solitude. Sthita. And so where we stopped last time was where Ramakrishna ji has reminded us, where is it that you can seek that solitude? It is in kone, mone and bone. Ghar ke kisi kone mein, which you create specially and make it the most beautiful silent corner for meditation, or in the mind, man mein, kone mein, man mein ya ban mein, or in the forest, which means take a retreat, a spiritual retreat in any of the sadhana camps which are going on around the world all the time. So that's like getting away from the world into the forest. Because when we are immersed in the world all day and we do not take recourse or take refuge in the kone, mone, bone, which means corner of the room or the corner of the mind or some corner of the earth where you can retreat, when we don't do that, all that the mind does is retains the color of all the mad galloping experiences of the world. The mind just retains that same color and it gets no chance to purge itself. So a mind in solitude, what about that? Well, it is just steady, like we said, like the riverbed, or even like the depth of the ocean. It doesn't rise or fall with the rivers joining from hundreds of sources. The rivers are pouring into the ocean. The ocean does not rise or diminish in any way, and therefore it remains vast and complete. When we say it doesn't diminish or rise, it means the quality of the mind is such that it does not lose itself in exaltation or excitement or despair or in being demoralized or in despondency. In both these cases, the ocean, the mind, which is supposed to be like an ocean, remains complete, fulfilled, steady. Being complete is actually the key word. And at that point, we have taken a small digression to Ashtanga Yoga of Maharishi Patanjali, because this silence, this quietude, this steadiness, which is supposed to come from dhyan, is not a shortcut. In fact, we need to have engaged in certain other disciplines in order to prepare the ground to even enter that state of dhyan, of quietude. And so very quickly we have seen yama and niyama, the first two. And if you unpack yama, then we see that there is ahimsa. Ahimsa meaning you are not dumping everything on top of the mind. If you have a sitar or a tanpura in your house, a musical instrument, you keep it finely tuned, you keep it clean, you keep it away from, you don't go around dumping things on top of your sitar or your tanpura. It would be unthinkable. But the mind is also a very finely tuned instrument. You know that the strings are so finely tuned that the slightest gust from the world seems to disturb it. And also it takes on the beautiful melodies of a satsang so easily. It's like a tuned instrument. But if you keep dumping things on it, well, that's what will happen to the instrument. It's going to be completely ruined. What about, so ahimsa is a way of saying that all these strong likes or strong emotions, anything in excess, I'm not going to dump it on my mind. That's all. Ahimsa, anything strong. Satyam, I am not going to justify the slightest falsehood of this sansar. Never mind what it does to me as a consequence, I'm not going to justify the falsehood. That is Satyam. Hold on to Satyam. And the ultimate Satya in any case is consciousness. How can we even hope to hold on to the highest Satya when we let go of the ordinary worldly Satyas, the truths of everyday living? That's a kind of disintegration of the personality. That to say that I am looking for the highest truth, but in my daily workings, I am capable of manipulation or deceit or betrayal or breaking my promise or all kinds of lies and deceit. No, it cannot work like that. A personality has to be completely integrated. Otherwise, we cannot hope to reach the highest. Brahmacharya, that was the third one under Yama. And that discipline simply means that we keep our attention and our intention focused on our spiritual growth. To say, okay, whatever I need to do in this world, I have a body, mind, intellect, I will engage in the world for the minimum and fulfill the minimum needs of my body, of my mind, and of my intellect. The minimum needs are there and I will fulfill it, but my spiritual growth is not to be compromised. And that is where my attention goes all the time. And therefore, if Arjun keeps his attention on that, his mind will be such that spiritual growth then will become his ultimate goal. And this little war, this little Mahabharat, why little? Because in the cosmic perspective of Krishna, it is just a small little skirmish going on in the outskirts of the city. It's hardly anything to be agitated about. In fact, Hanuman, who was on the flag of Arjun's chariot, it is said he also fell asleep out of sheer boredom, because he thought, what is this childish little Mahabharat in the vast, vast expanse of cosmic time, when you've seen thousands of lives and you've come and gone in different bodies, in different naam and rupa. What does it matter right now whether I win this battle, I lose one, I win one? Yes, dharma should be protected, and that means Satya has to be protected with all my might. But how does everything else matter? Every relationship is now changed. How do you know who Bhishma was in your last life? Maybe he was your worst enemy. Maybe Dronacharya was someone who owes you a debt and he had deceived you. Maybe I'm talking from the perspective of Arjun. You never know who your relationships were in your previous thousands of lives, and they carry over some debt which they have to fulfill through their actions right now. So whatever is happening to us and to Arjun right now is a result of the prarabdha. When prarabdha, the law of karma, will play out anyway, like it or not, it's going to play out anyway, then why the agitation? Just keep your mind and attention on your own spiritual growth, because the purpose and the only purpose of having attained this life is to learn new lessons in our own spirituality and then move on. That is the only goal. What about aparigraha, the fourth one? Aparigraha, the fourth discipline under Yam, Ashtanga Yoga, is that you live with a tenant mentality in your body, in your actual brick and mortar house, in the actual world, as well as in the symbolic world of the body, the city of nine gates. Live like a tenant. You have to pay your debts, you have to pay your rent, and just live on. And you cannot misuse it. You have to keep it nice and clean, the mind and body. But it is a tenantship. It is a tenement. If that is the attitude, it's not going to bother you. Last one, asteyam. Why take credit for anything on this earth? Everything is happening by the law of prarabdha, karma, God, whatever you call it, the law of nature. Prakriti is taking its course. What is there for us to take credit for? Some achievement, some talent, some success, some... So asteya means take credit for nothing, accept nothing without returning it. These little debts that we owe to people, whether they are emotional or material or whatever, these are debts we come back, we have to pay these people in different forms. And therefore carry over no debt. And therefore, with all these 5 disciplines of ahimsa, satyam, brahmacharya, aparigraha, and asteyam, we are expected to attain the a poise of meditation, a meditative poise in the mind, the stillness, where there is no wandering, no clamoring, no blaming, no comparing, no irsha, no jealousy, no envy, no complaining. That is a kind of mind that is ready. This is only readiness. If this discipline, and it's hard work, it is tapas, it is not as if to say I have read it, I have understood it, and now I am it. No, I can read about swimming, I can read volumes and volumes about swimming or cycling, but I cannot be a swimmer unless I get into the water. And therefore it is not enough to just read or hear about it, shruti. So why do we carry around so much in the head? Everything in chapter 6 is about dhyan, and dhyan is about lightening the load of our own baggage that we are carrying, the psychological baggage. It comes also from many lives, which is also deep in the subconscious, which we can say, oh, I can't help it, it is prakriti. Yes, prakriti will play its game with you, with us, and that game we have to recognize and quickly have the strength and the power to turn it around towards sattvic. For that strength and for that power, the mind needs to be strong. It cannot be a fickle, agitated, flimsy, unstable mind that can do that. That big task cannot be done by a flimsy mind. And therefore Jesus himself had said, come ye to me, all those whose burdens are, all those who are heavily laden, come ye to me. That means, of course, he was speaking from the point of view of bhakti. So when Jesus speaks, it is pure bhakti, which means just surrender your burden to me. A bhakta can speak this language. Yes, you can do it that way too. You can do it through yoga too, like Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, through an effort of the controlling the lifestyle. Or you can do it through vivek, through dhyan, through gyan. Vivek, through gyan means simply to hold on to the truth that I am consciousness, and that is the only immutable, infinite truth and nothing else. So if the mind can hold on to that gyan, good enough. If it cannot, get into karma yoga, or to keep the mind shuddha and disciplined through yoga, karma yoga, or through ashtanga yoga, good enough. If not, Jesus said, come ye to me, all those who are heavily laden. Bhakti, surrender to God. Jesus or Krishna or Allah, or it doesn't matter, Buddha, Mahavir, it is a surrender. Otherwise the mind plays the devil with us. Okay. What about the second limb? I'm not going to do all the 8 limbs, of course, of Ashtanga Yoga. That's another big topic. But the first 2 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, Yam and Niyam, are important. Why? Because in the chronological order in which Ashtanga Yoga was designed, Yama and Niyam are the first 2, and then comes Asan. Asan means to be seated in the seat of meditation. So if the third one is Asan, then naturally the first 2 have to be accomplished. And therefore I'm going to do only the first 2. First being Niyam, and the second is Niyam. Well, how do we unpack Niyam? Niyam has another 4 lifestyle changes. And these lifestyle changes have to be made in order to be seated in the seat of meditation. First is Shaucham. The 4 are Shaucham, Santosh, Tapasya, Swadhyay, Ishwar Pranidhana. 5 actually. Shaucham, of course, it means cleanliness in the most ordinary sense. So we have to keep a clean body, but also a clean mind, which means that all that we do in our interactions and recreation, anything that we do in this world, and companionships, and what we do in our leisure time, everything has to be aimed at upliftment. Will this thing that I am engaging in right now uplift my mind to the sattvic? All that we have to do is ask ourselves this question. There is no big mystery about this. Okay. Santosh. Santosh is a very, very, I would underline it as one of the key factors in creating a mindset which can sit still in the asan, the seat of meditation. Why? Because asantosh, unfulfilled desires, are going amok in the house, in the room. I was going to say, yes, the mind is a room. Santosh means I am okay with what I have, and what I am not meant to have in this life, it is my prarabdha not to have it anyway. So what I am meant to have, I will have it. That is my prarabdha. Prarabdha, the bundle of experiences which have fructified from my previous karma and which have to be fulfilled in this one limited lifetime, is called prarabdha. Just a reminder of the definition. And this prarabdha will play out anyway, which means what? What I am meant to get, I will, no matter what the obstacles. What I am not meant to achieve or gain, I will not, no matter what my effort or purushartha. That is the law of nature. And the moment I accept it, the moment I recognize it, finished. That is santosh. Tapasya is the third one, toughening your mind. I have spoken about this. For dhyan, for swadhyay, for hours of study, for japa, for satsang, and for seva. Satsang, seva, sadhana, swadhyay, all these are efforts that we make for spiritual shuddhi, and that requires a lot of strength, because we do it sporadically, we do it briefly, we do it in a scattered way, we do it off and on. Sporadically means off and on. There is no consistency, there is no continuity, and there is no conviction. And therefore, this doesn't sound like tap. It sounds like an occasional dabbling in this and that. So spirituality is not a shopping center where we are window shopping. We have to engage actively. Swadhyay, of course, is what we are doing. Shruti, listening to the great masters through any source that we can find. And that satsang is also swadhyay in a way. Ishwar paridharana. Paridharana of Ishwar means surrender. Surrender. Whatever is being done through the Lord, through Prakriti, through Prarabdha, through the law of nature. Whatever name you give it, it is not as if, yes, we have control over disciplining our minds right now, disciplining ourselves as in yoga, but it is not as if this entire course of our, the direction is being designed by me. So there is no point in being proud of it. It's just that wherever this direction is taking me, this swadhyay, sadhana, seva, satsang, just let it lead us, and we just catch hold of the tail of the cow. Let the cow run. We are just catching the tail and saying, yes, just lead me on. And that's what means Ishwar paridharana. Ashtanga Yoga, of course, is another advanced study. Maybe we can do it another time. Coming to verse number 16 is where we were. Chapter 6, number 16. What are the pitfalls? Why is it that I cannot reach those heights? Natyashnatastu yoge yogosti nachaikantamanashnataha nachate swapnashilasya jagrato naiva charjuna. Yoga is not possible for one who eats too much. Imagine the detail to which Krishna is going. The one who eats too much, nor too little, nor one who sleeps too much, nor too little, O Arjun. What does this mean? It means that he has talked about the sublime reality of the ultimate consciousness, that truth which we have to reach. And now suddenly Krishna has come down to the very rock bottom brass tacks of practicality. From spirituality to practicality. It's quite obvious. The obstacles to dhyan. Why is it that I cannot concentrate in dhyan and keep my mind quiet? Because we have either eaten too much or too little and starved ourselves. So even Buddha tried this experiment upon himself, and he went into very, very severe penance and austerity, and found that his body had become a skeleton. But then the pain of his body began to interfere with the tapasya, the dhyan of his mind, and he said, no, this extreme tapasya, this extreme penance cannot be the rule. And therefore moderation or the middle path is what Buddha had recommended in any case, in everything that we do, not just in meditation or food or sleep, but temperance and moderation in everything, in drink, in binge watching meaning we have these OTT platforms now, and the Amazon and Netflix and whatnot, and no doubt there is some very uplifting material over there, some very very creative material over there. But do we know, just like food also, we cannot do away with food, so we take the best and just enough nourishment. So also the mind and the creative urge in us can be nourished with just that little amount of watching these creative pieces. But binge watching, one serial after another, that's become the bane of the day to day, from youngsters to old people, because they are locked at home and they don't have any other direction or guidance. They are binge watching hours and hours of drama, and no doubt that most of these programs are very very compelling to the mind. So the mind goes into excesses. Beware of excesses. When Krishna says food and sleep, it also means excess in talking, in gossip, in thinking. Why are we overthinking anything? We need functional thinking. I need my mind in order to know how to drive the car. I can't afford to forget that and say, oh, my mind is not in it, or my thoughts are not on it. Functionally, the mind has to be completely alert. But overthinking, somebody has overtaken me on the road and I overreact, and then I go home and talk about it, and I discuss it, and I retell that whole account to people around me. Why are we dwelling so much in small incidents? Overthinking is an excess. Entertainment is an excess. Socializing can be in excess. Shopping can be in excess. Acquiring things, buying things, possession can be in excess. Even wealth, we have to know where to draw the line. The problem is, we say, oh, where, but we don't know. We are doing it in moderation. We are doing it like everyone else. How do you know everyone else is not doing it in excess? We have to draw our own limits, and we have to know. And the markers are very very simple. Marker is anything that does not take me to my higher spiritual goal, anything that does not allow me to have Shravan, Mananam, Nitidhyasanam, meditation, Dhyan, enough space and silence for these spiritual activities, is a distraction. My markers are very clear. I mean, you don't need someone else to show us our markers. For example, Sita had Lakshman to show her limits, and to say that, Sita, you are not going to cross that Lakshman Rekha because Ram is away. Why is Ram away in the first place? Because Sita is possessed and in an obsessive desire for that golden deer, which she just had to have. And therefore Ram had to accede to her request, and you know the whole story. And Lakshman said, all right, this is your limit and you're not going to cross it. At least there was Lakshman for Sita. And yet, it is not Ravan who crossed that line. Who crossed that line? Sita. So we are like that. Our minds are like that. So first of all, we are in a worse position because that Lakshman Rekha hasn't been drawn for us in excesses of food and drink and all kinds. Even our emotions sometimes sink into depths of despair and then exult in mindless excitement over some small achievement. Why these excesses in the emotional life or the physical life, or even in... So that Rekha also has to be drawn by us. Unfortunately, we don't even have a Lakshman to guide us. And no Ravan from outside, no devil from outside is going to lead to our devastation unless we cross that line like Sita did. Ravan would never have been able to abduct her. Our minds cannot be abducted by the world. How silly. The world is it's innate. It is jada. It doesn't have a consciousness of itself. It is jada vastu. How can that come and abduct our minds? It cannot. So it is our own minds. And so anything that is gained from the outside world through our body, mind and intellect, and which is made an inward experience, it is made by our mind. It is made an inward experience by our own mind. So that we don't have a choice. This is the body we have, this is the mind we have, this is the intellect we have. Okay, so take it or leave it. Now if this is the horse we are riding on, we cannot afford to abuse that horse which we cannot dismount. I cannot dismount this horse and say, oh, this mind, it's rotten, let me get rid of it. You will be rid of it, I will be rid of it only when I die, when I drop this body, or in deep dhyan, or in deep meditation, and I do drop it in deep sleep. But willingly, out of an intent to be clear of the clutter, intentionally, I can do it only when I have control over I cannot afford to abuse that horse which I cannot dismount. So it's going to lead me wildly into the forest and knock me about, which it is doing all the time. But in meditation, I'm not outside, right? You can say I have gone into a kone, mone or bone, corner of the room or a corner of the mind or a corner of the world, some retreat. Yet the mind is wandering outside, because the mind is a subtle thing, and that subtlety allows it to break all the barriers of time and space and go out into the future fantasy, or go out into the past of some imagined or slight or hurt. It has that freedom. So why are you allowing it the kind of freedom of a wild horse? That is what he's saying when he says moderation in food and sleep. Simple verse, but has deep ramifications. Number 17. Yuktahara viharasya yukta cheshtasya karmasu yukta swapnavabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkhaha. Not only in food and sleep and all our exertions in the world, but every kind of work and exertion that we indulge in the world, we have to exercise moderation. Which means what? Sometimes we get too involved with the work that we are doing. We get involved emotionally with whatever we are trying to accomplish in a personal way, in the family or professionally or whatever. It doesn't matter. It is that involvement, when we get too involved with the kind of work that we are doing in the world, the mind is bound to get agitated. And the result of an agitated mind is a mind which is exhausted, an exhausted, tired mind, and which is going to lead you to emotional kind of inertia. You don't have any strength left emotionally and mentally to reach that highest truth which God has, or Krishna has mentioned over and over again. And therefore, a simple tip by Krishna, not only moderation in food and companionship and socializing and food and sleep, but also in the kind of work we do. How do we know that we have not that we have overexerted? Because when we are doing something and we are completely involved in it and completely it almost a meditative state of mind, when we are involved creatively or even in seva, and we can work for hours because we have this energy of doing seva or something creative, and we don't realize how time has passed. But then how do we know that we have overexerted? This is the simple marker. The simple marker is any work that leaves you emotionally and mentally exhausted and sometimes even disgusted with that piece of work and agitated is overexertion. Simple. So the balance is required even in work. These are simple markers, and Bhagwan goes very compassionately to give some more markers in 18. Yada viniyatam chittam atmannevavatishthate nispruha sarvakamebhyah yukta ityuchyate tada. What about this perfectly controlled mind which is not rushing out into the agitations? It is free of longing. See, nispruha has been mentioned over and over again because it's not simple desires which agitate the mind. We need simple desires otherwise, and we need to fulfill them, otherwise we cannot sustain our mind and body. It will become like not being able to survive. For our own survival, simple desires of our mind, body and food and companionship, all that is required. Spruha means thirst of longing and craving and a kind of maddening, galloping thirst, which it's that longing and craving which is to be discounted, which has to be dropped. Otherwise we cannot. Then it is said, the one who has dropped spruha, that thirst, that craving, that longing, that is a yuktaha. That's what is mentioned here. Such a person is a yuktaha. So a mind which is demanding all the time, we just need to recognize what is it that it is demanding. It is something that we need for my, is it a simple desire which I can fulfill and then do away with it and be done with it? Or it's going to lead me to more and more hungering and thirsting and clawing and desiring. If so, then do I have the willpower to nip it in the bud and stop it right there? So spruha is the key word here. Nispruhaha is the key word in this one. Just as moderation in the last verse was the key. Some more tips coming up. What is the mind of such a yuktaha like? Yatro paramate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya yatra chaivatmanatmanam paschannatmani toshyati. Oh, I'm going to read number 19. Sorry, I read 20 by mistake. Yatha deepo nivatastha nengate sopama smrita yogino yatta chittasya yunjato yogamatmanaha. The mind of number 19, the mind of a yuktaha is such that it has been drawn inward. How? It has been quietened. How? So we have already seen it can be done through the disciplines of Ashtanga Yoga as a yogi, or through bhakti where you surrender to Jesus or Buddha or God or whatever and you say I'm not the doer, or through Vivek when you realize that what your true nature is. You may choose the path, but a mind is completely silenced, like a lamp in a yatha deepo niva tastha, like a lamp which is placed in a windless place. That lamp does not flicker. You mean to say that let me give a simple example of a beam of light. A beam of light which comes through a crack in the window on and the rest of the room, suppose it's dark on an evening, you see that beam of light and you see it appears as if it is dancing and shaking. Not the beam itself, but something in that beam, within that beam, seems to dance. What is it? It is the dust particles which are dancing. The moment those dust particles are removed, suppose through a vacuum, because no space is bereft of these particles, if that dust is removed, only the beam remains. Do you think the beam shakes at all? So the consciousness on which the mind is playing, that cannot in any case be shaken. It is always still. And so the mind, if it is merged through dhyan, and the theme of this chapter is dhyan only, through dhyan, if the mind is merged back into that consciousness on which it plays, then it becomes as still as the consciousness. Which means, what is still? The stillness is borrowed from consciousness. The lamp by itself can never become still. So what happens to the mind then? Its nature, the nature of the mind is by itself, it is chanchal. Chanchal meaning forever wandering in hopes or desires or aspirations or future plans, or in the past hurts or resentments, whatever. It is forever wandering. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna. Going ahead, Arjun is going to complain to Krishna to say, look, I cannot hold my mind steady. It is not the nature of the mind to be steady. Yes, we agree. And once, on the one hand, you say it's not the nature of the mind to be steady. On the other hand, you say it can become as still as the lamp in a windless place. Yes, because in deep meditation, just as in deep sleep, where the mind has merged with the consciousness, it can become still. What are the kinds of disturbances that are on the mind usually? So when In the worst possible case, it is bereavement. Bereavement meaning the loss of a dear one, death of a dear one. But in such a case, Vivek or Gyan helps us when we realize that, oh, this soul is only traveling. The body is left behind, yes, but the soul is only traveling through many, many centuries, and it has fulfilled its purpose in this particular life only. In my relationship and in this sansar, it's fulfilled, finished. Its job is over. The prarabdha is complete. And therefore, it is leaving as a complete prarabdha soul, let's call it. And it's just traveling. The moment in your vivek or discernment, you tell yourself that this vivek helps drop the sorrow. What are the other sorrows that we have? That we want happiness from Vyakti Vastu Paristiti, and we want permanent happiness. But then Bhagavan has already said, Agama Payuno Anityaha. This is all transitory. And what about the soul that is gone traveling? Well, Avyaktadini Bhutani, Vyakta Madhyani Bharata. They are manifest only for a brief period, just as you and I and Arjuna manifest, and Bhishma Pitama and Dronacharya. They in this body and form and name have been manifest only for this brief period of 18, 90, 100 years. Or 120 if you take the life of Krishna. And that manifestation is only for this life. So when you know this, where is the bereavement? And when we know that everything is transitory, then where is the agitation of wanting this or that, spruha, thirst for this or that success or situation? And what about the mind which is already, this is the third kind of vikshepa or agitation, and that is your old hurts and your old negatives of their own mind. Well, they are part of the past prakriti. So recognize it, as we said. And the moment you say, okay, it's coming out from my subconscious, it's coming from prakriti, I can have control over it by recognizing it. The moment I recognize it, I have control over it. So we may use vivek to know that we are here as passing souls, and so are the loved ones who are dropping their body and dying. And all the Vastu Vyakti Paristiti experiences are transitory. So my joys and sorrows which also come out of those are transitory and temporary. I tell myself these things and the mind is quietened. Out of these three, we can use any of the three methods to tell the mind, hey, look, you don't need to gallop around or to become such a craving, thirsting, demanding mind. There is nothing to be gained or lost. It's all Prakriti. Number 20. Yatro paramate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya yatra chaivatmanatmanam paschannatmani tushyati. So, atmanam paschannatmani. The intellect will see. I can see the intellect, I can see the mind, I can see where it's galloping, I can see the cravings of the body. I want this sukha, that dukha. But when all this is quietened, what remains? In deep meditation, that is also called Turiya, the fourth state, or in deep sleep, only awareness remains. So, what can you see the awareness with? Seeing meaning witnessing. I can witness the body, I can witness my mind. It is right now it is going helter-skelter, and I can witness the intellect or my pran, my breath also. And then when nothing remains and when it's all quiet, what remains is awareness. How am I aware of that awareness? With what light? With what awareness? So awareness is seen only by awareness, which means Atmanam Paschannatmani. Only awareness can see awareness. There is no other apart from that. If there was another apart from that, then that would be the ultimate truth. There has to be one ultimate, eternal, infinite, unshakable, final truth. But there isn't. And therefore, this awareness that we are in, when we are silent and in that deep awareness, that is the ultimate, final, infinite and eternal truth. So, you see the awareness by itself. That is the original you, Arjun. Arjun, that is the original you. And why are you getting so agitated, Arjun, talking about I am a soldier and I have accomplished this and now I am attached to Bhishma and Drona and my beloved cousins. None of that matters because your original you is only that ultimate awareness. Okay, so what is my goal? Again, a small reminder, number 21. Sukhamatyantikam yattad buddhigrahyamatīndriyam vetti yatranna chaivayam sthitashna chalati tatvatah. When this yogi feels and realizes that infinite bliss, that infinite state, which can be grasped only by the pure intellect, which means it's beyond intellect, but only when the intellect has been emptied of all its agitations, and when all the indriyam, matindriyam, which means when it has also transcended the senses, only then you can grasp and be established in that ultimate reality. So we have a choice. Just like Duryodhana and Arjun had a choice just before the battle. What do you choose? Krishna said. Do you choose the army or do you choose me? And each one of you can choose, make your choice, and the other one will be decided in any case. Duryodhana made a very conscious choice that he wanted the material world. He said to Krishna, I want your army, which was called the Narayani army. And I don't want anything. He chose the material world, thinking that that will lead to his ultimate success and sense of power which he was seeking, and sense of fulfillment which he thought power will bring him, that sense of completeness and fulfillment. And therefore he said, I want my power, my position and my victory, and I want your army, and I know Krishna, your army is the best. Okay, Krishna said, fine, your choice, you can have my Narayani army. And therefore, but the condition that Krishna had laid was, Arjun, you choose me, Krishna, but I am not going to raise a weapon. I am not going to fight the battle. I am just going to be by you. And Arjun said, that's enough for me. That's enough. I just need you. So that's a conscious choice that we have to make at every step of our life. Are we making a choice for the spiritual life where we think that it's just a few smattering of hours in a week or in a month or in a day? Okay, I have one corner and half an hour I spend there for meditation or for remembering God. No, Arjun is going to be by my side, my Sarathi, my guide throughout my battle of this life. That was Arjun's choice. Only then can Krishna, God, redeem him. Only then can Krishna redeem us, when we choose him to be by our sides right through our battle of life, and not to say, okay Krishna, I'll call you when I just need to kill that one Jayadratha or that one particular enemy or Karna. No, I'm going to be there right by you. And therefore, what was the reward for choosing spirituality, which Krishna is the symbol of? Arjun got the reward of the highest Gyan. Through the 18 chapters of Gita, Krishna sat and told him the highest Gyan. That was the ultimate reward that Arjun got by his choice. So we can have that reward by our choice. And if we choose the material world, like Duryodhana did, and Duryodhana was also highly educated, it's not that he didn't know. Janami dharmam, he said, I know what dharma is, I have been taught by the same masters. But I chose the material world, and that led to his downfall and to the downfall of his entire family, which is symbolic, highly symbolic of how we are leading ourselves, what are the choices we make. And number 22, Yam labdhva chaparam labham manyate nadhikam tataha yasmin asthistato yasmin sthitato na dukkhena gurunapi vichalyate. Having obtained that highest, there is no higher beyond that. And having attained that highest knowledge, that Gyan, beyond that, nothing, there's the heaviest of sorrows cannot shake me. Why? Because as we just explained, that in bereavement and in loss we remember, oh, this is just a soul which is on its journey. Avyaktadini bhutani vyakta madhyani bharata. And in our chasing of these material joys in the world, we remember Agama Pa, Anitya, everything is transitory, Anitya. And the agitations of my own mind, oh, I remember that, oh, it's my previous prakriti from my previous lives which is playing upon me, my subconscious. Let me have a handle on it. When I know this truth, what sorrow can shake me? There is no sorrow and no agitation which can shake you also, Arjun. That's what Krishna is saying. And this is the larger frame of reference which has been given by Krishna to Arjun. That your goal is much bigger, your frame of reference is much bigger. It is your journey through many, many lifetimes. Why are you sinking into this, the joys and sorrows and sukha, dukkha and ups and downs of this small little life? And this small little body and small little mind. In this small little body and mind, you cannot see the vastness of existence, which I, as Krishna, can see. And so, how will yoga help me? How will dhyan help me? So, 23. Tam vidya dukkha samyoga viyogam yoga samyitam sanischayena yoktavyaha yogo nirvishna chetasa. You have to do only one simple thing. And what is that? Break this yoga, this bondage that you have with your own sorrow. You know how well we embellish and how we decorate our sorrows and our small little agitations, and we talk about it endlessly with people. Why? He's saying just break your this marriage that you have with your own sorrow. Just divorce yourself from it, because it's not yours. And therefore just disclaim it, disown it, and say, I renounce sorrow. Finished. It's a declaration you make to yourself. No more strife, and no more thirst, and no more crying over loved ones. Number 24. Sankalpa prabhavan kaman tyaktva sarvana sheshatah Manasaivendriya gramam viniyamya samantatah. All the sankalp that we have in our minds, what is the sankalp? Oh, the sankalp of some future imagined success or a desired situation, कि ये situation ऐसा हो जाए, वो चीज़ ऐसी हो जाए, वो relationship या व्यक्ति, वस्तु, परिस्थिति ऐसा हो जाए, तो मेरे मन में एक उसकी धारणा, एक image बन गई है, and I've made a sankalp of it that it should turn out in that way. That relationship, that situation in the future should turn out in the way that I have done the sankalp. Bhagwan is saying, what sankalp? Just drop the sankalp. Everything will turn out according to your prarabdha, and that is the law of nature. Even I, Krishna, cannot interfere with that. And therefore, empty yourself of all this sankalp. The key word in this verse is sankalp. So detox your mind. Detox it how? In fact, this verse, number 24 of the 6th verse, may be termed as one of the key verses, or is the theme. It's the very crux of this chapter about dhyan. You cannot do dhyan unless you detox the mind and drop all the sankalpa. The moment you drop this sankalpa of the past and the future, the mind is already detoxed. And that is the crux of chapter 6, dhyan. But how does it happen? Number 25. Shanai shanai rupapar med buddhya dhriti grihitaya. Shanai shanai rupar med buddhya dhriti grihitaya. Atma samyamya manah kritva na kinchidapi chintayet. Shanai shanai. Little by little, gradually. It's not going to happen all at once, because it takes months and months of practice, even to swim or to dance or to drive, to become a perfect master of that art. So what about dhyan? Shanai shanai. Gradually, you are going to reach that goal. Because what are thoughts? Thoughts in any case are nothing but neural waves, and those neural waves are sparked either by some stimuli from outside. Something is happening outside, someone said something, and that neural spark was ignited. Or it can be ignited by the emerging of some purva sanskar thought or idea or impression of the past. Either of these two things can ignite some kind of neural path, neural spark. That's what a thought is, that's all. So the moment the thoughts are silenced, there is no mind, because mind rides on these. And no more sparks, no more neural pathways, and therefore the mind remains in silence. Some people are even afraid of going into this deep silence because they feel that they're losing contact or control with what they identify, which is me, मैं हूँ, ये body, ये mind, ये अस्तित्व, और मैं उससे control lose कर रहा हूँ, and they suddenly are quite fearful of this loss of contact. So it takes time. That's why Shanai Shanai. I'm going to end with the little incident that occurred recently. A TV actor in the prime of his youth and success, he passed away. And when some of his friends went to condole with the family, they found that yes, his near and dear ones were wailing and weeping, and they were distraught. Quite understandably, they were distraught. But when they spoke with the mother, you know what the mother said? She said, yes, that was a soul on its journey. It's gone further on its journey. And the body that all of us wear, they are only vastra. They are only, it has been mentioned in chapter 2, it is only vastra. It is only a garment we wear for this brief period of time. And only the vastra has been shed. And this young man has gone ahead on his long spiritual journey, and I bid him good luck. It's the mother, and she's the only parent. So the family is not large. And her poise, how did she get that poise, that stability, that serenity, that calm? She achieved it only because of her spiritual understanding of the truth about this life, the spiritual understanding that this body is only an avaran and the soul goes ahead on its journey. Where did she get this spiritual understanding? She got it from, because the son and the mother and the family were attached to a group called Brahma Kumaris, and they were regular visitors to Brahma Kumari satsang, and therefore for years together they heard this truth repeated over and over again in every satsang, in every bhajan, in every pravachan that they heard, until they were convinced, deeply convinced of the truth of this. And therefore that truth helped them get over, helped the mother at least, to get over this great bereavement. And this is an actuality. It is not something airy-fairy and from the ancient texts of 6,000 years old. It is from yesterday. And therefore we have to be convinced of it to be able to have that kind of sublime spiritual poise. And therefore our pursuit of spirituality continues. We meet tomorrow. Hari Om. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Shri Krishnarpanamastu. Hari Om.